Hello, how are you, Erin?
Good, how are you? Can you hear me?
Oh, let me turn my volume up. Okay, and I'm going to email Micah back. I don't know if he was.
I just admitted him in the waiting room, so.
Oh, you did. Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
he should. Okay.
I tried to start early and I didn't get started early, so.
Oh,
sometimes
okay.
my
He is here.
computer-
Okay, good. Okay.
But April didn't send out that reminder. Hello, Micah.
Hey,
So I don't know if we'll get very many or not. Well, it is a couple minutes after 10:30. I don't know who else, if anybody is going to be joining us. So I guess this one's on interactive exhibitions. And I guess we don't have a leader, I guess, at least not that I'm aware of, or some sort of proctor host or whatever. I can tell you I have very few, if any, interactive exhibits in my museum. I mean, unless you count all my outside buildings. But yeah, I just, even before the pandemic, I didn't have very many. I have one in my Native American exhibit that is like it's a hide that's been stretched like a frame, and so people can scrape it so it gets soft. But that's the extent of my interactives. I have in our Howard Hanson exhibit, they can push a button and listen to some music, but that's the extent of my interactive exhibits or hands-on exhibits. So I don't know what if you guys have a lot or are planning anything, or I was hoping that somebody from like the Children's Museum would be on. So, because they're that's pretty much all they are. But if you guys have anything to put forth or whatever.
Yeah, I was in my head, I was putting together for the program for this once monthly musing. So I've got a bunch of notes and stuff like that I can
Go for it.
Okay. Awesome. So I had planned to like do this more like just podcast TED Talk. So answer emails, do things like that. Why, I'm just kind of going on. And then if you do have any questions, go ahead, put it in the meetings chat. But Micah, I'm at the Nebraska Prairie Museum in Holdridge, and when I volunteered to look a little bit more at interactivity of exhibits, just because it falls in line with a unique way of thinking. I'm sure I'm not the only one here that has at like 2 a.m. completely remodeled your museum, completely moved everything around, completely, and so like I think we're all in the same boat by doing that. However, one thing that's fun with, especially when you're thinking at interactivity, is it gets more into like the nitty gritty of what is an exhibit. And so I personally really nerd out about like the philosophy of history, like what constitutes history. I'm also very nerding out about like the way that the general public, we're all in the practice, we all know, we're historians, we kind of know what we're doing, I think. And but the general public, they might just have a simpler background. Maybe the last time they touched a history book was in high school so many years ago. So with that said, I always like to think of, whenever planning a new exhibit, is thinking really big, and then you can always scale down. And I like to really think about the who rather than the what, because we can get really important and in the weeds about what we're wanting to talk about, but we need to maybe take a step back before we start on the content and think about, okay, who is this for? A really good example that I think of is when NMA hosted the conference before COVID, before all that. It was in Nebraska City, and we had went and visited the Lewis and Clark Center. And that one's a really good example of their target audience is young families, specifically kiddos. And a lot of their exhibit design focuses on that. It focuses on the climbable things. It focuses on very simple, things to touch and interact with. However, you start to, kind of alienate the older generation, so like I didn't really glean anything from a lot of their exhibit design because I wasn't their target demographic. And so I think that's really important too, because that will really set your limitations when designing an exhibit. So something that we've done out here is we really love the train design, but we like model trains and things like that we've had donated out. And one thing that's interesting is that we have to think about, okay, who's our target demographic? Typically, it's little kiddos and old guys that nerd out about model trains. And so the old guys, they can pretty well be self-contained. They look at it, they'll appreciate it. The kiddos was an interesting quagmire because we needed it to be high enough off the ground that the kiddos it would be eye level for them. So we can't make it too tall, because then they can't see and their parents would have to hoist them up for that. But at the same time, okay, now are we talking 2-year-olds, that are barely walking, that's like maybe 2 feet off the ground. That's really low. So if you are an adult and you're looking all the way down, it makes awkward. So that's the biggest exhibit interactivity that you're going to think of, is not only just how the exhibit works, but specifically looking at who are you really wanting to focus with it, because we had to put like plexiglass and stuff like that up there, because guess what, everybody's going to touch it and they're going to want to touch it, especially kiddos. And so whenever we're designing a product, we really want, or a designed exhibit, we really want to think about it. It also, when looking at the interactivity, what it really made me look at too is what is interactive, like what constitutes that. So think in the back of your head, what in your definition, what is it? Is it hitting a button? Is it something as simple as reading? Like you're interacting with the exhibit by reading what is listed there, or is it cranking things or moving things, or, and so one quote that I found I latched onto is, interactivity is where a visitor acts on the exhibit and the exhibit reacts in some way. Now that one's somewhat limiting. So if you're reading it, that's passive. The object is not changing or evolving. However, if you are actively like hitting a button, that does something. Or if you are, if you walk by and it's a motion activated picture frame that plays a video, that is actively responding to the guest. And I think that active response is a good definition for interactivity, because information in text form, I would say, is like the simplest bare bones level of interactivity. However, just as something as tactile, something that, the guest can touch and feel, is a response by that object, and so I think that, look, and then also when looking at exhibits, it was going back to why we even have museums. So this is a kind of a declarative statement that I want you to kind of think on, is creating a physical exhibit creates a conversation with guests, even though there's nobody present. So even though you don't have a lecturer, even though you don't have somebody there that is presenting the information, a physical exhibit is a conversation with guests. So it is conveying that information, and in a way you want to create a dialogue between the object or the things or the text or the video with the guests. And I think that stepping into that mind frame would help you kind of think about ways that you would want to create dialogue with your guests. I really found this quote really funny. I'll let you know, I'll read the quote, and I want you to kind of put in the chat, who do you think said this quote? This is from 1968. It says, we believe that people in society would gain some sort of understanding of science or technology by controlling and watching the behavior of the apparatus and machines. So by the quote is saying that by having the general public actually in seeing how things work, it would help them gain a new understanding. And this was from 1968. Yeah, engineer would be correct. I'll speed it up just a little bit. It is Frank Oppenheimer, the Frank Oppenheimer, the destroyer of worlds Oppenheimer. And so that was a really interesting quote that I latched onto, because he was in charge of, I think it was like the Kansas City World Fair or something like that. Or he was in charge of creating an exhibit. And so like you said earlier, is when we think interactivity, I think we all agree that children museums or natural history museums or something like that do a really good job at interactivity, because kids' attention spans, they want to have something kinetic, they want to have something tactile, something they can move and operate. But adults, I feel like, also want that. They want to have this ability to engage with the material just as much as a kiddo. But at that same time, knowing your target audience, you can isolate and alienate older audiences by making it too simple. And so that's a big quagmire that you want to kind of maybe think about too. And one thing that I was sitting there trying to put some thought together too is creating, and I don't know if NMA or if AASLH or those kind of more bigger, museum bodies, if they have a scale of interactivity. So for example, what I've noticed is that if you have something that's not very interactive, it's usually very simple to implement. It's printing off a picture, putting together, something. Whereas things that are much more interactive are typically much more complex. They're much more difficult to actually implement. And so I look at this way too, is that it makes the complexity and the intricacies and the difficulty of these complex, really cool, engaging materials is great, but does it work? Like, you hit a button, but does it actually work? Does the audience know how to work it? Is there enough information there that the audience can intuitively know, oh, I can pick this up and do this? It doesn't have too many different working parts that all need to come together in order to make it function. And so if the guest can't make those informed decisions, and they can't make those mental connections themselves to make the object work, then it's a failure. And so you want to make something interactive, but you don't want to make it so complex that the audience can't relate to it. It is either too physically demanding for people that are older or younger, or maybe have the mental ability. Like we're saying, is it suitable for kiddos, but is it too easy for adults? Okay, well, we make it for adults, but does that only qualify for, you have to have like a master's level in physics engineering to figure it out? And so I think that those are all definitely like questions going into any exhibit. And we can go, I think, just with that starting foundation, I think that what we can do is then implement those into our own museums. And so something that I've been working on is it starts simple. We're doing some kiosk stuff. So these are just a simple touchpad that guests can have. The first one we're trying to prototype is in an interview with the artist. So we have that really cool Prisoners of War paintings display. And right now we have his entire oral history just as a 30-minute video, which maybe is a little too much attention for most guests. And it's on a clunky TV and stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to splice the video up, and so that the audience is asking the artist the questions that they want to ask. It plays the clip of that whole video in him responding in real time is what we're gonna try and create the illusion of. And so I would encourage you to think of, okay, well, it can an audience, if they are engaging, like you were saying, with the tanning of the buffalo hide, or the scraping. What are some ways that audiences could ask maybe somebody from that era, or something of like a natural, or like somebody that's like a mountain man? You don't want to hire him full time to be out here. However, I think it'd be really cool if he was sitting there like, hey, how do you do this? Hits the button and it shows a video of the whole process. I also think that we run into this issue too of, we want things to be interactive, but not with our artifacts. It's that ultimate thing that kids hate is, hey, you can come in here, but you can't touch anything. And so I think that if we have more modern buffalo skin, or modern things that kids can touch, they want to touch it. It hyper focuses on what you condition your guests to come into your museum space and to see, oh, I can touch those things, I can't touch those things. And so when you train your audiences as they come in to, like for us, we have the same color and the same markers that denote each one of our buttons. So we have the player piano, we have the trains, we have some other areas in the museum that have a big red button with a big red arrow. And it's crazy how many people walk past it and they don't even see a giant red arrow. And but it's just that if you condition your audiences early enough on, that by the time they get to, oh, I can touch this, then it's one where, oh, then they're looking for it. Especially with kiddos, they pick on that stuff so quickly. So I would encourage you to say, okay, have a giant yellow marker on like a piece of like buffalo hide or whatever, as or a piece of cloth or something like that, big yellow box. And it says, okay, you can touch these. Then by the time the guests get through and they see these on mannequins or the other things, they'll know, oh, I shouldn't touch that. That doesn't have a big yellow box. And so thinking on ways that you can outline your path to both condition audiences to what they should expect, what they should do, but also lay out your interactive exhibits strategically so that guests have somewhere to do, something to do that they can focus on. And so, yeah, that's all of my kind of shower thoughts, 2 a.m. thoughts on interactivity exhibits. I definitely think it's been really fun to think about it, because kiddos can just run one side to the other, but at the same time, you don't want to be a children's museum. And so I think interactivity exhibits, even if they are made for an adult level, just to have some kind of a response and feedback is very popular with all range of guests. Our most popular exhibits right now are our player piano, the jukebox that we have working, and the trains, and they're all interactable. People really enjoy the POW Center. But again, all those are my older guests. And so now that what that does is it tells me, oh, I need to have something in there that will help engage and draw, the younger audiences into that space and make it more kind of inclusive for multiple range of guests. So yeah, I didn't know, what are your thoughts? What are some things that you would say using that? What I think is a fairly provocative statement is that interactivities where a visitor acts on an exhibit and the exhibit reacts in some way. I think that's fairly, I feel like that's fairly provocative, because it really puts into question that, like, okay, if you're just sitting there and reading, the object is not reacting to the guest. And I think that we want to create those literatures so that we can create the dialogue and the interpretation, the historical interpretation that we're wanting. But is the audience feeling anything by that? Are they getting, is it changing their mind if they don't even read it, if they just glaze over it? So yeah, we'll go into a dialogue session. If you want to, feel free to chime in, and we'll just kind of keep going that way. The map is a great idea.
Yeah, and I typed this in the chat, Micah, but that idea of breaking up a half-hour video into small chunks and letting the user pick what questions, like what are they interested in, is a nice way to still get the same information out there, but more in easily digestible, a time frame instead of half an hour. Because I can see too, for the typical guest that's visiting, like, okay, this video is half an hour. No, I need to dedicate my limited time in this museum to just sitting for half an hour. I'm interested in this, but yeah, if you can get the same information to people in little, bite-sized chunks, I think that's a nice idea.
Yeah, for sure. And we're partnering with a company called Turner Technology. And right now we're working on a prototype, which would be just a self-contained, you throw your text, your video, or your like your pages that you want to put together for each one of like the tiles, and then your questions. And my goal with this is that we'll create a prototype, and I will really want to get this out there to all of our museums. I want it to be a self-contained prototype that's easy, intuitive to use for museums then to implement these throughout. And so, because right now that's the biggest thing I've ran into is you can buy a touchpad, you can buy all these types of hardware, but nobody creates the software side of it. So when I'm trying to create kiosks, I've found that it's either, oh, we'll do that for $30,000. Okay, no. And so that's where it's like, I want to create something very simple, very intuitive, but something that we can do is scalable. And so Turner's been really cool at working with us. I think they're out of Omaha.
I guess
Cassie, which museum are you with?
we're at Boys Town.
Oh, okay.
So we have a lot of interactive walls. We have 2 electronic interactive walls. Then we have several video screens throughout the museum that are interactive. The big thing that we've noticed is our older screens are all black when you walk past them. So you actually have to physically push a button to start the video. So most people don't know. Like I said, we have the map at the front desk, and we try to encourage our volunteers to tell them, here's the map. That's where all the interactives are. Push the buttons, listen to audio, watch the videos. But when they walk by, they really don't realize that they can go push the button. So we are trying to work on getting those all interactive screens so that when you walk by, there's pictures or videos or something rolling across the screen. So you know, oh, I can go and I can touch that and it's interactive. So that's what we're working on right now. But yeah, like we have our huge bus that kids can get on, and it actually has a video on the bus. You push the horn and the video starts.
That's cool.
So that's fun for the kids. We found a 1960s driving simulator that the boys used when they were redoing the career hall. So we brought that over, and that's been interesting because people don't know what it is. So we're trying to figure out a way to, make a sign or make it interactive so people know, oh, I can sit on this and this is how the boys learn to drive. I guess our two biggest things with the new interactive walls is that the software is hard to use. And I'm the only person that has access to the software. So trying to get, film from marketing and get it on there, I have to, if I don't do it very often, I have to retrain myself to do it. And then we have 3 kiosks in our hospital area. So it teaches everyone, like we do a lot of cochlear implants. We work with a lot of deaf patients. So there's a couple in there that teaches them the different levels of sound. So you can hear, like, this is what it would be like to have a hearing aid. This is what it would be without a hearing aid. So we have that one. And then we have a neurobehavioral research center from the hospital. So that one teaches kids how your brain sees and recognizes emotions. So it has different faces, and the kids have to connect that face with an emotion. So this is my mad face, this is my happy face. The kids really like that one. So we have those 3 kiosks. And then in the Hall of History, or in the Father Flanagan House, we have a kiosk that's just strictly history on the house. So they can push on different pictures and it tells them different timelines about the house. So we have that one as well. So we have quite a few interactives that they can go and do. It's mostly videos. And then the 2 electronic walls, you can have video libraries on them. So you have to be really careful that you don't have tons and tons of videos out there. And then the other thing I noticed too is that if you can keep the videos under 2 minutes, that's about the time frame, or that's about how long people will watch. Because you can set like little reports and stuff. So if you have a really long video out there, if people stop it, it will give you a report as to, okay, how long were they watching? And about 2 minutes is about the average attention span of most of the guests that we have.
Yeah, I can see that in real time as well. It's what I find just fascinating is you have 2 types of guests. You have the ones that are in and out in about 30 minutes. I was like, oh, I mean, if you've ever been out to our museum, you know it's massive, like square footage wise. And so you're like, dang, you were sprinting. And whereas like other guests are out here for 2 hours and they're like, oh, I'll be back here tomorrow. And I'm like,
yep.
Okay. And so, yeah, and that's where I think is, your target demographic too, it is really important, because are you trying the people that, spend 2 minutes out of time with a video, what type of content are they really focusing on? So I think that's where the technology side of things can get really interesting, is because you can see, like, I hope to track, like on this questionnaire with the interview with the artist prototype deal. I hope I could track that so I can see which questions the audiences want to respond to more. And that could help also guide future interactive exhibits, and that on ways that we can, focus on specific, 2 minutes is a great idea too, is just, keeping things on a short format. We have a couple of motion activated picture frames that play a video when people walk by, and those are just full cuts from videos and stuff, and I'm like, these could really be pared down. Even 15 minutes is still a long time, let alone to ask even more. So I definitely think that that's the future of where things are going. And but yeah, that's cool. So I didn't know, does anybody have any other ideas? One I thought was kind of cool is working with Nebraska Public Power. We have the hydroelectric dam that's nearby, and I've talked to them about creating a exhibition that demonstrates, it would just be a simple like water reservoir that pumps water over a turbine that makes a light bulb go on, and then it goes into another reservoir, and then it pumps it back up. And this would be something fairly simple to implement. I think, I don't know, we need to do some prototyping. But I definitely know that like that's something they've been interested in funding. And so if it's kind of a build it and they will come situation. But I think that would be a really fun interactive, even though it is just a button push. I mean, kids are seeing, how water creates electricity. And I think that would be a cool infographic kind of a exhibit.
When you're using oh, sorry. Here,
That's okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so when you're using electronic based interactives, how do you budget for, repair, maintenance, those sort of things? Like, yeah, a button push isn't going to be quite as, detailed and maybe not as expensive to fix, but, electronic stuff goes out of date. They need fixing, updating, software, that sort of thing. So.
And that's definitely what I was saying on the scale. So I would say like touchscreens and things like that are probably a 3 to a 4, depending on what it is. When it's something simple as you touch a button, like in a touchpad, like if it's already pre-done, I anticipate it lasting, for several years. However, if you're doing things that are more complex, like guests are dragging like a game that's demonstrating some kind of a process, that would take a lot more time to develop the software to make sure it works. And that's definitely something that I think is a lot more on the complex side. But I would even say like on our button side, our trains derail all the time. They constantly be put back on track. Our player piano is literally held together by like a paper clip and a dream. And we have to season that. Our record player kind of also has issues here and there. And so I definitely think that, yeah, no matter what it is, as soon as you have moving parts or as soon as you have something that can go wrong, over time, I do think that, yes, you're going to have upkeep. You're going to have, a lot of these. And that's definitely the problem with interactives. However, I also want to do the caveat of, is it like a piece of paper with text on it is probably going to last forever in the scheme of things. But does it have as important of an impact to the guests and their experience and understanding the history and what that dialogue is? Do they get more out of it at the end of the day rather than just having it something that they read? And so like it's that worth it factor, we love keeping the player piano active because guests love it. They love to see it work. They love to work with it. The trains, kiddos go screaming as it runs around the track. And so like what we see is, in a way, it's you almost get affirmed that like that's the right way to go because you see how audiences react to it. And I think that I want to keep the trains going because I see how the kiddos interact with it. And but yeah, no, that's a great question, especially on like the technology side of it. Is like we've have a veterans kiosk that we've been babying for the last 10 years, which 10 years ago software compared to today's software is night and day, and it is such a pain in the butt. It always is breaking down. It always has issues. They update one thing and it erases half the other things. And so that's the negative side, definitely, that like what you're talking about. And so yeah, there's kind of two sides.
Has anybody been to the Boot Hill Museum in Dodge City, Kansas? Barely any at all? Well, they've recently built a new sort of entrance area, and it gives a little bit of a history of, the area before the settlement. But one of the interactives, and this is it's sort of a walk-through type of interactive, and they have a disclaimer before you go in. They have an area and they're talking about the buffalo hunts and that sort of thing. And you walk in and they have it set up so that you can experience what it was like with a buffalo stampede, and the ground shakes and you get this massive, and then the sound you feel like, but they, like I said, they have a disclaimer in front of it, and they mention, okay, this could be sensory overload for somebody, just, and it's not a constant running one. I think it's on a loop type of thing, but it was very interesting because I wasn't there when the whole, but even if you weren't in that gallery, you could still hear it because it was sort of echoing through the gallery, this huge sounding like this massive buffalo herd was coming through. So that one, I guess that would be considered an interactive one, but it's more like, okay, you're going to be right there, because obviously they have like a big, taxidermist buffalo and that sort of thing. And then I remember that the Nebraska History Museum, when they did their World War II exhibits, I think when you first walked in, they had like a living room or parlor type thing, and there's a radio playing music, and then if you stand there for just a few minutes or just a little bit, then it breaks into like a news report of the bombing of Pearl Harbor and that sort of thing. So I'm of two opinions of the interactives, obviously with the software and in the expense, and also the cleaning, and especially in this post-pandemic world, about people not touching or touching things or being cautious about touching things. We're going to be getting a Smithsonian exhibit next year, and one of the things that was brought up is, well, how do we clean this exhibit? Because there are a lot of interactives in that one, and the guy from the Smithsonian is, well, I think you can just use Clorox wipes or whatever and that type of thing. But like I said, we don't have a lot of interactives. I just don't know. There weren't very many here before, and unfortunately, the nature of my job being a one-person show, I have to pick and choose what I can focus on. And unfortunately, any exhibits I do have to be really, I hate to use the word simple, but they have to be really quick and efficient. And I have like no budgets for exhibits. So I have to, it's whatever I can do in house is what I got. I mean, it would be great if we had it in interactives, but so I guess we need to kind of look at where we can find potential funding for our interactives or technology or that type of thing. We did have one of our famous men, the exhibit was, they did have a television, and you could push a button, and it ran for 45 minutes, and it was talking to people who knew this guy and that sort of thing. And it was very low production quality, but it's just in a videotape, and so I have to get that converted. And so I have since removed it, and I've put a little thing, hey, if you really want to watch this video, we'll stick it in our ancient VCR, and we'll see if it runs. But yeah, we just, for whatever reason, just don't have. Now, like I said, our buildings, we can go in the buildings, and then in that case, you are interacting with that building, because you physically can go in, you can sit at a desk, you can sit at a pew, you can go into the, railroad station, you can go up in the caboose and that sort of thing, with a few exceptions. But I think one thing that seems to be popping up, that might be an interesting thing for us to look at for NMA, is interactives within historic houses, because we have a historic house, Cassie has the Potter Flanagan, April is in a historic house, specifically historic house museums, and what, interactives, aside from sitting on a chair, that somebody may have sat in, 100 years ago. Or we do allow people to play Howard Hanson's piano, that sort of thing, but maybe just figuring out how to incorporate that into the historic houses. And because sometimes it's a little jarring with historic houses, all of a sudden you have this piece of technology in there that, if your house is from the 1880s, well, they obviously wouldn't have had that, that type of thing. So figuring out a way to sort of incorporate that into those types of museum settings.
Yeah, I definitely like historic houses is an interesting deal. I hadn't really thought about that aspect till now, but I would definitely say that like the exhibit itself is a kinesthetic interactive idea. You're walking into a space, like you're walking into the artifact, you're experiencing the artifact as it's been experienced, like the house, like the building, the structure. And so I definitely think that on both sides of it. One, I remember in Nebraska City, in one of the houses there, it was fairly, like you say, jarring. you have like the house as it was, and then a brand new like graphic, like the plexiglass graphic with all the pictures and modern text with like the stainless steel bracketing, and it looks super modern. And I'm like, wow, that is just it's jarring. And so I definitely see what you're saying. Has anybody experienced or had any ideas working with like app software, or working on different things like for your website? Using it, something that I found that was pretty simple is you can have your text information available like on your website, and then on your info card, you can have something really simple and then include a QR code that is scannable that goes to your article on your website that talks about it in more depth. You can get free QR codes just looking at a QR code translator online. And so when you're making your info cards, that's something I've been doing, that especially this younger generation, they love to find scavenger hunts, especially with something they can do on their phone that is included. And you can use YouTube videos. So if you have somebody that has an oral history that you either have on your website or on YouTube, you can have it like, well, when I lived in this house, and I think that would be really cool. It's almost like having that living history factor, but on your phone. And you can go into more depth on those. And I found really good results with that. We'll have like high school groups that come in, and they'll be sitting on their phone. Like, you have some groups that are just sitting and they don't really experience too much of the museum. And then I have other ones that are just like in pods as they like skulk around. And I can tell like observing it, like some of them gravitated to that as like a fun scavenger hunt, that they would just go like QR code to QR code to oh, I found one, and they all flock over. Oh, I found one, and they all, and so that's something I think that would be very easy to include. I don't know, a traditional app. I don't know if anybody else has had experience trying with that. Our chamber in town has just now started to do one, and we are partnering with them to create a historic map of Phelps County. And so this is going to have important buildings, hotspots, things like that. And so on this app, it'll have a map, and then overlaid is like a pin. You can click on that pin and it would blow up the history of that site, that building, things like that. But I'm giving them the information. They're doing all this software, so I don't have to deal with that part.
We use the Tour Buddy app at Boys Town. I don't know if you've heard of Tour Buddy, but we do that. They start at the visitor center. They can download the app for free, and then it has GPS technology. So as they drive through the village, it tells them the buildings that they're passing by. And then it brings them to the museum, the church, and Father Flanagan's house. So when you come into the museum, you can there's like pictures of the museum, the church, the house. When they hit the museum, it just shows different parts of the museum. So as they walk through the museum, there's like a picture of the boy in the box, and then they can read about the boy in the box, and then it kind of goes chronological. So they'll see the boys playing marbles, and it tells them about the boys playing marbles. And then when they leave the museum, if they're like driving by the church, it'll talk to them about the church, and then they can go in the church and press the picture, and then it tells them about the church and shows them pictures. Same thing with the Father Flanagan house. And what was really cool about the Tour Buddy app is no matter where they're at, like let's say they're traveling and they're leaving Nebraska and going into Iowa, no matter where they're at, they can go back and they can read the history of Boys Town on the app. So it doesn't matter where they're at. They don't have to be in that building to learn about it. They can read about it wherever they're at. So that was really cool, and it's really easy to update too. Like we're getting a brand new, they tore down our high school, and they're building an educational center. So when the educational center is built, we just let the company know, and they change the GPS, they change the information, and then we change the pictures and stuff on it. So that's the one that we use. And we really encourage guests to download it when they come in. We have, like when you come into the visitor center, there's a little posters, and then they have little postcards that tell them how to download it and how to use it. And then our volunteers will sit and walk them through them and show them how to use it. It's a really simple one. Huh. And then the other thing that we do is we used to have QR codes around campus that they can scan. We no longer have those because we have the app. But we do work with the Omaha Visitors Center because they have fun things for kids. Like right now they have Omar the troll who lives under the pedestrian bridge downtown.
That's cool.
And he has a little friend named Omaya, who's also a troll. But Omaya goes to like 13 different places in Omaha and she leaves a little footprint. So it's an actual sticker that has her footprint and it also has a QR code. And so when the kids go in, they have to find the footprint, they have to scan the QR code. It tells them about the site that they're at. And then they get like a little button. And then the visitor center, when they have all their buttons, the visitor center gives them a little backpack to put all their buttons on. So we
That's a
try
cool
to work
idea.
with, yeah. So we're always trying to work with the visitor center too, to make sure that our museum is part of all those programs. They've had a couple other ones, like during the College World Series, they do like scavenger hunts and stuff too. So we try to work with them. So that's kind of what we use.
Okay. Well, this has been really nice. I have a new thing to check out. So thank you for that, Cassie.
You're welcome.
I don't know if anybody has anything else, but I'm kind of out of my list of things to go through. So I highly encourage you guys to go out. Starting this, I read probably about 3 papers talking about exhibits, and all 3 of them said about the same things. You want to isolate who is interacting with your exhibit. You want to isolate what complexities are involved with it. And you also want to make sure that it is intuitive enough that guests know that, hey, I can touch this, I can work with this. And it should be intuitive enough that they can figure out, like if it's a puzzle, puzzles are incredibly difficult to design because it's either you make it too complex, they give up, or you make it, and the same thing, like you're saying, like even video format, you make it too long, you make it too engage, you want to make it engaging, but if you make it too long, then they drop off. And so it's like, that's something you always want to keep in mind on any exhibit, let alone creating interactable exhibits. And so, yeah, thank you so much for listening to my rambles for this one. This was fun. So if there's one in the future, I'd be happy to talk about.
Great. Anybody else have anything to add? April, it's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you guys too. Sorry I was late getting in here. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of add on to what Aaron, what you had said, and Micah, what you had said about the digital interactives in a space and how we've managed to do that, because yes, our first floor is 100% recreated to look like an 1880s Gilded Age mansion. And so, yeah, how on earth are we supposed to integrate a modern digitization without it being super jarring, like you both kind of said? And one way we've done that is we actually contracted and built like this pedestal case that mimics the woodwork around and stuff like that. So it's not quite as, and we kind of found like a space that people walk past, but it's kind of in an alcove area. So we find ways to, you kind of have to get creative with it for sure. And plus, when people walk in, one of the first things we tell them is don't touch anything, because like Micah had said, the building itself is the interactive. And so we put like small kind of discreet but noticeable signs up that say, please feel free to interact with this. So people, because if you, unless, especially with these younger generations, I've noticed, if you don't specifically tell them, they are hesitant, and, which is respectful, but, also, makes, you have to kind of anticipate what they're going to do a little bit. But yeah, also with the interactive, we try to use the building as the interactive if we can. Like before, we would have people just go up the grand main staircase, but now when we do it, and we allow that now if people just want to come in for kind of a self-guided experience, because we offer guided tours, but then also if you just want to come and enjoy the exhibits at your own pace, you can do that. We don't obligate a tour by any means. And so, but if they do the guided tour, we take them up through the hidden servant staircase instead. So it literally, and people really like it. They actually like going up the hidden servant staircase. And we tell them, we kind of give them a, the prompt again a little bit, where you literally tell them, as we go up these staircases, we'd like you to imagine what it would be like if you had to go up and down these all day, because they're narrow and they're kind of they're not steep, they're regulation size. Surprisingly, for the 1880s, they actually are regulation size, but they're kind of steep and there's no railing and there's no windows or anything, because you are literally encased, because that was the point, is to keep your servants hidden from your visitors and things like that. And so it's a good way to open up a conversation about class distinction as well as they go up the staircase. And so we have them go up the main staircase, but then go down the big staircase, so they actually get that experience of like the grand entrance into, you know, the grand hall. So it's a way for them to experience both, I guess. And so, yeah, like Micah said, we try to use the building itself as an interactive as much as we can and try and get people to imagine what, and so the spaces help us do that. So we kind of try and do both the modern digital, but then also utilize the space as well. And yeah, thank you, Micah, for being here and for taking over. And the part that I heard sounded super interesting. So
Okay, I think the next one is on holiday celebrations, and it's also it's a different week. It's the 16th, so it's a week ahead because the following is Christmas Eve. So we'll have to figure out what we're going to talk about with our Christmas celebration is actually before then. So ours is like the first weekend in December. So our board meeting, I'm probably just going to be like zoned out because it's just going to be one of those weekends. But everybody if there's nothing else, have a good Thanksgiving, and we'll see y'all later. Thanks again, guys.